Okay. Good morning. Good morning. The hearing board of the South Coast Air Quality Management District is in session. Today is Wednesday, January 30th, 2019. The time is 9:00 a.m. We are meeting in the hearing board room in Diamond Bar. We have two items on the agenda for today. One matter, the other is the hearing board general meeting, which will occur after. And the one matter we have on for today is SCAQMD versus Torrance Refining Company, case number 6060-5 for a status report, modification to the standing stipulated order for abatement. And who is representing the district council today?
Good morning, Madam Chair. Karen Manwaring on behalf of the district.
Thank you very much, Ms. Manwaring. And who is representing Torrance Refining?
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman. It's Michael McDonough from Pillsbury representing the petitioner today.
Thank you. So obviously we are here for a previously arranged status hearing and modification hearing. And I know that the parties attempted to put it on consent. It was deemed to be late according to when we need to have those documents filed in terms of placing it on consent. However, it is very helpful to have those documents in advance, and will certainly cut down on the length of the hearing today. And so the first thing I'd like to do before we begin is simply to mark two of those documents, one being the declaration of Mr. Sneer, and I believe, correct us if we are wrong, but I believe we are up to Exhibit 15 for the respondent. So we're going to mark that as Exhibit 15-15. And also we have a proposed order, which it states proposed order, but I believe it would just be a slight amendment to the standing order, and we will mark that as Exhibit D, as in dog, for the district, or D as in district. It was on the original stipulation. Yes, I believe it was clipped to, did you take those papers apart? If you take those papers apart, there are three documents together. It's the proposed stipulation, which we can put aside. We don't need that. The proposed order and the declaration of Mr. Sneer. So if you take the clip off of that, you will have three staple documents. And with that, I don't know how the parties wish to proceed in terms of who would like to begin with an opening, since normally we would start with Ms. Manwaring, but I don't know if you'd like to begin.
My opening is going to be very brief, so if Mr. McDonough doesn't object. All right. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Ms. Prusak, I really appreciate your comments this morning because I was going to include an apology in my opening statement for any unnecessary effort on your part, but it's exactly as you identified. I assure you I'm familiar with the hearing board's rules and procedures, including the timing. I anticipated the request being rejected, but it did give us a vehicle to get these documents in front of you and also to signal to you that we do not anticipate anything controversial or objectionable. And as you saw in the declaration of Mr. Sneer, the facility is operating in compliance. There are some successes already related to this order, and we look forward to hearing the refinery testify as to those. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. McDonough, any opening?
Really not much to add. Mr. Sneer will give you the update as he has at the prior hearings. I would just ask for the record, we may want to mark the status report, if it hasn't already been marked, as an exhibit respondent 16, I think.
Let's do that. The status report, and what was the date that that was filed?
1 minute. Hold on.
Give a stamp.
Yeah, so I think it was the 28th. I'm not seeing I have the draft on mine.
I just want to make sure that, Madam Clerk, that you have a copy of that.
Friday.
So if not, we can get copies.
Yeah, I believe it was filed on January 25th. Yeah.
Because we don't seem to have the copy of that.
Okay.
My copy is not, the copy I have is not actually time-stamped, so I can't assure that it was filed with that package.
Okay, well, I mean, we can also provide it and do a hard copy, I guess.
Why don't we do that? Because I didn't have it, and I was wondering if maybe I just missed it, but it doesn't seem that the clerk has it, and I'm seeing my fellow board members don't seem to have it either.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's my question. Do we want to stop and make copies? All right, let's finish why don't you finish your opening, and then we'll take a break.
I'm pretty much done with the opening, so yeah, we just go to get copies made.
Okay, so we'll go off the record, get those copies made, and we'll come back with Mr. Sneer. We're off the record.
Oh, you should never swear. Sorry, I wrote on that already. You may want to put a sticky over the writing before. Yeah. Yeah, we're not even to that yet. For some reason, they didn't file our statement. We were asking for them to file these documents on our behalf. They didn't file. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's all right. I didn't notice whether they had it or not, but it's not a big deal. We'll get copies made. And, yeah. I mean, the declaration pretty much, yeah. Probably talk to Charles. Yeah. It's not a bad little break here because as soon as we start, the middle kids get going.
They have a second item.
It's their general meeting, which is their sort of, they talk about rules, they talk about the regs. That's going to be after lunch anyway, so if we get done, it's an early lunch for them. they always looking to get out there.
How come they didn't get the declaration?
She was supposed to file, she apologized for not. She was supposed to include all of our documents. Apparently didn't include the statute. But, as I said to her, your declaration was pretty much almost verbatim. They were missing for the content. I'll let them know on the record that, what you're getting now is essentially represented in my year's declaration. So don't worry that there's something new there that you haven't seen, but, it'll provide, if anything, your declaration is more expensive because you have the bullets at the end. So I'm not too worried, yeah. it'll flow into your testimony
So
perfectly.
you want me to talk about here? Okay.
Yeah, but you can see like at the end where we have the big question, that I'll probably just go right into the slides after you answer that. Thanks so much, I appreciate it, yeah. And I'll keep this handy just in case.
Okay.
So this will be 16.
This is just in case the reference I need.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we are back on the record. I'm going to first mark a few things. First, I'm going to mark, we received a status hearing statement on stipulated order for abatement, and we're going to mark that as Exhibit 1616 for the respondent. Also, I neglected to say at the start of the hearing, obviously, Mr. Balagopalan, this is his first hearing in this matter, yet there have been so many, so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Balagopalan to explain his preparation for today's hearing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, in preparation, I did review all the tapes of all the different hearing dates from 2016, 2017, 2018, and I reviewed most of the document that Mr. Cameron left behind. So I'm up to date on what the events were,
And feeling prepared.
and I'm prepared.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Balagopalan. And then finally, I'm going to ask Mr. Sneer and any other witnesses who may testify today to please stand to be sworn in. Please raise your right hand. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. And Mr. McDonough, I will now turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Sneer, could you first say and spell your name for the record?
Mayor Sneer, M-E-I-R-S-N-I-R.
I don't believe your microphone is on or near you.
We'll try it again.
Is it on?
Yes.
Mayor Sneer, M-E-I-R-S-N-I-R.
Okay, and Mr. Sneer, what's your position at the Torrance Refinery?
I'm the reliability manager at the refinery.
And could you give us a brief background of your education and any certifications?
I have a master's degree in mechanical engineering. I'm a licensed professional mechanical engineer registered with the state of California.
And how are you involved with the 220 kV project?
As the reliability manager, this project falls under my jurisdiction. I forgot to mention that this is my 40th year in this business.
And could you confirm for the record that you read the status report that's filed as Exhibit 16 and verify that everything you've read in that report is true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
I did.
So, summarize for the board, how has compliance with the order gone generally?
Very well. And I can say that because we continue to enjoy excellent communication and excellent cooperation between PBF and SCE. We have nearly daily communication, on occasion more than once a day. The California Public Utility Commission accepted our plan with regards to the electrical reliability enhancement project. This is a major, major milestone that we were hoping to obtain by the end of 2018, and indeed received that. The detailed engineering that was started in January 2018 was completed and submitted to PBF last Friday on January 25th, 2019. It is currently under review by PBF individuals. In the last 2 years, reliability improvement both within PBF, within the refinery, and external to the refinery by SCE has resulted in fewer flaring events as follows. In 2016, these are all flaring events as a result of power interruption. In 2016, we had 3 of them. In 2017, we had 2 of them. In 2018, we had 0.
And does the 0 extend to 2019 as well in terms of flaring events?
So far, we had 0 in 2019.
Okay, so let me just walk you through the changes we've had since the last hearing. You recall that we had a hearing in March 2018 to report on this order. Do you recall that hearing?
I do.
So I'm going to ask you about developments that have happened since that last hearing, and starting with Condition 3, of the stipulated order. Recall, this was a condition that required us to evaluate safety-critical devices that were not backed up by uninterruptible power supply. Please provide the board with an update on how compliance with that condition has gone.
We have evaluated approximately 2,000 safety-critical devices. Of these 2,000 devices, 225 were powered solely from SCE. 222 of these were analyzers, and 3 were flow meters. All of these are now connected to a UPS unit. We're fully in compliance with this condition 3.
Okay, so all 225 of those devices that you talked about are now connected to UPS?
That's correct.
Did any of those changes require a permit revision or a turnaround?
Fortunately, no, so we did not need any outages or any permitting, and we were able to accomplish that.
Okay, and have you kept the district and its consultant apprised of the
That's correct.
installation?
The district got a list of them and full communication of the devices.
Do we think any further work is required that will require a permit or a turnaround on the UPS installation?
No.
So now I'm going to turn to condition 4 of the order. If you recall, this was the condition that required us to implement feasible and cost-effective upgrades to critical utility systems that would allow the refinery to continue operation for some time in the event of a power outage. Do you remember this testimony at the last hearing?
I do.
And can you report to the board the updates in compliance since the last hearing in March 2018?
So we have identified 3 possible enhancements to the auxiliary boiler, which this condition addresses. And 2 of the 3 have been already implemented. The third one requires an outage, and so within the next 18 to 24 months, we'll implement the last one.
And so generally speaking, high level, can you describe the 3 enhancements, the 2 that are done and the 1 that's yet to be done?
The first one was a letdown setting for the steam so that we can sustain longer period of power disruption. The second one was setting the steam water level to a higher level. Both of these basically result to having larger volume of steam available to deal with any kind of flaring event or any kind of emission.
So these are the 2 upgrades that have already occurred as of today.
That's correct.
What's the 1 upgrade that remains to be done?
The burner management system, that one will require a shutdown of the unit, of the boiler, and that's the one that we are planning to address within the 18 to 24 months.
Is this going to require a turnaround?
Yes.
Again, just to summarize, these upgrades are designed to enhance the boiler's ability to withstand a power outage and deliver steam for 30 minutes?
That's correct.
So what has been the result of all of this upgrade work to date in terms of mitigating or eliminating flaring?
Well, the results are that we are better prepared to weather any kind of power disruption. And of course, we see the results in the reduced amount of flaring, as I mentioned, between 2016 and 2018, up to zero events last year.
So you're at 0 flaring despite the fact that the project is still ongoing and hasn't been fully implemented?
That's correct. That's important to notice that all of these improvements have been done before we have actually implemented the electrical reliability project.
Okay, this would be a good time for the slides. Okay, so Mr. Sneer, I'm going to be walking you through a slide deck, and I don't know, Madam Chairman, if we want to mark this also with an exhibit number, if we have done that already.
We don't have a copy of it, so I think we can just have it be a demonstrative
Okay.
exhibit
Okay.
that you're showing.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you, Mayur, to explain what you see on the slide in front of us here.
So 2016, these 3 events, you recall, basically triggered this kind of abatement order. And the worst of these 3 was this 26-minute complete power outage, not just disruption, but complete outage. In 2017, we had a couple minor power events that resulted in 2 flaring events. These were actually fairly short time flaring events. And none of the events in 2018 resulted in any flaring whatsoever as a result of electrical power disruption.
So looking at the 2017 numbers, can you confirm these were two events that were discussed with the board in the March 2018 update hearing?
That's correct.
And just to refresh people's memory, these were two flaring events that were very short in time period and involved no smoking?
That's correct.
Okay. I think at this point, and we'll go to the next slide. Okay, got it. So could you describe to the board what we're looking at here?
So in the last hearing in March of 18, there was a request to show a simplified sketch of the project. So this slide is showing a very simplified concept of the project. If you look at area A, this is the existing SCE 220 kV system, and we are adding the two towers just below the A, and these cables or feeders then go underground and go between these two buildings. The two buildings are not owned by us, and at the moment we're trying to get easement resolved so that we can actually go between these two buildings and underground into Building B. Building B is the switch station that the SCE and PBF ownership will change. From point B to point C, which is approximately 3/4 of a mile, the 220 kV will go underground, and that portion will be executed by PBF all the way to the existing substation, which is compressed and mobile in area C. At the moment, we're getting all our power from the area designated as D, and once the project is completed, the power will come from point A.
Okay, and then I'll ask you to describe this slide. I think it maybe relates to the last one.
So this slide shows the two buildings and the space in between. It's about 25 feet in between, so fairly narrow. And you can see these cables, there are 12 of them. They'll be coming underground from SCE to PBF. Each one of these cables weighs about 40 pounds per foot. So these are very large, very heavy cable. You get an idea of, you get a sense of that from the individual standing there. That's, I'm
Sorry, go ahead.
That's the area that we're trying to resolve the issue of easement between the owner of that property and PBF.
And finally, this should be our last slide, if you could explain what we're looking at here.
Just to get an idea of the size of these 220 kV to 66 kV transformer and why it takes so long to order and fabricate and ship them here, this is the typical size of this 220 kV to 66 kV transformer.
Okay, and I think at this point, unless, Mr. Sneer, you have anything else to add on the general compliance or the relationship with Southern California Edison throughout this period?
I don't have any.
Okay, so I think at this point, we're open to questions and anything the district has.
Let me turn it to Ms. Manwaring, if you have any questions.
I'm going to defer to the board to question the witness.
I can start. I had a few questions. Most everything was answered in your declaration, but I did have a few questions. First of all, since this is such a long-standing order, I like to always check in and see what your approximate time frame is that remains. So, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I went back through my notes from the last hearing, status hearing, and I believe you had estimated that you thought the whole project would take about 27 months from January, this January. Is that still the same? First of all, was I correct? And if not, what is the time frame that you're looking at?
You are correct. My previous statement in March of 2018 was 27 months from the date detail engineering is completed. The detail engineering was completed this month, so we're a little bit behind by maybe a month or two. We're now looking at funding the project, and probably 27 months from the moment we actually get the funding, the project will be completed. So no change in the duration of the project.
Okay, so it's we still have about a little over 2 years left on the total of
That's
the
correct.
project. Okay, thank you. And then in terms of, I may have missed, but when you were talking about the 3 items that were related to the auxiliary boiler, are those the critical utility systems from that evaluation?
That's correct.
Okay, so there were only 3 of those that were identified.
That's correct.
Okay. And I wanted to go through, and 2 of them have been done, as you testified. They've been completed, is that correct, or they just don't need a turnaround?
They are completed.
Okay. I noticed that you mentioned that you will submit appropriate permit applications, et cetera, by condition deadlines. Is, for the third that remains, is there any permitting that's required, or just a turnaround?
At this moment, I do not believe any permitting required is necessary.
Okay. So it's just a matter of waiting for the next turnaround of that particular process?
There is a little engineering involved to make sure we're doing the right thing, and then, of course, making sure that the timing is right when the boiler becomes available.
Okay, and your estimation, I know you said this, I just want to make sure I have it down, is about 18 to 24 months from now.
That's correct.
Okay, and then that will be done, and condition 4 will be in full compliance?
That's correct.
Okay. I think that might be it. Because I did have that other question after reading your declaration regarding the UPSs and whether they were all installed, but you just testified that they have in fact all been installed.
All 225 are installed, correct.
Okay, fantastic. Board members, other questions? Mr. Balagopalan?
Yes, I'm sorry, could we put that, yeah. Mrs. Mayor, I believe you were going to step down to 35 and then step up to 66 from 220. So does this transformer do both?
No, the 220 is going to go from SCE to the switching station, that yellow building, all the way to our existing 66 kV system. The step down will be right there, from 220 to 66 kV.
Okay, so this new one is not for the 35 or the step down for the 30 to 35?
The new one, meaning
Aren't you putting a new transformer to step down from?
we're going to put 2 new transformer right next to the existing 66 kV station where we actually receive the power right now, and right there go from 220 to 66 kV. And we're going to utilize the existing system that we have in place there.
Okay. Can you go back a couple of slides? Oh, sorry, here. One before on the, I'm sorry, the first one on the the flaring, and you mentioned there were no flaring due to power disruptions, but were they flaring due to other events? And I'm saying that, and I mean, I did look on the AQMD's website, and third quarter 2018, there was substantial amount of flaring reported. So I'm just wondering, what was that due to?
My data is strictly as a result of power disruption. I do not. I keep track of these disruption. Anytime we have a power disruption, I keep track of that. I don't keep track of any other flaring, so I don't have any information. I can't tell you what the information is.
So you
As far as the flaring that not related to a power
flaring.
event. Yeah.
Okay. So and I was surprised to see that huge amount of emissions due to flaring in the third quarter 2018. I don't know what is that due to. You know, it exceeded the performance target for the year, and I think the total is out of quite a huge amount.
Yeah, unfortunately,
So you don't know what that
unfortunately,
led to it?
I'm not prepared to answer that right now. Yeah.
But it's to the same flare, so I think it flared in the gas went to the same flare, so you don't know what was going. You were not notified. There was emission going to the flare.
The flaring event as a result of other than power disruption is tracked by our environmental department, which is totally separate department. So I don't know the volume or the emission or the details behind it. I don't want to mislead you and tell you that. I know
All right,
that.
thank you.
And I might just add for the record, for reference, this order only deals with power interruptions and flaring associated with it. Other types of flaring aren't a subject of this order.
Thank you, that is correct, Mr. McDonough. Ms. Byrd, you had a question?
I'm sorry, I was trying to keep following the timeline in here. And I know some things were happening at the next turnaround. Did you say when that next turnaround was?
The scheduled turnaround is, I believe, is scheduled within the next 24 months. I don't remember the exact date. That's why I gave it 18 to 24 months in the event that the boiler will come down earlier.
Okay, so it's not a date that's yet
It's not
known.
fixed
It's
yet,
still
no.
to be determined. And that's based on the evaluation of the equipment and,
The boiler comes down on a requirement by Cal OSHA. There's a permit to operate, and there's a deadline for that. But also, we have to do a little bit engineering to get the boiler, the burner management system in place. So I don't want to rush into that, so I want to do it during the right time of when we actually bring the boiler down.
okay, understand. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Senator, did you have questions? And then Mr. Balagapur.
You're the reliability engineer, manager
That's correct.
for the whole site,
That's correct.
and the question was asked of you about these other flares that took place in 2018. You say you knew nothing about it?
I don't have the, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I don't have the data with me here. I can get the data.
You didn't say that.
I-
You said you,
what I-
knew- you said you knew nothing about that happening.
I don't know enough to give you information, so I do not mislead you. The information is available, probably available on your website.
Based on my understanding of your response to the question, was that you were not aware that these flares had taken place.
It's not that I'm not aware, I don't have that information. How much was released and at what frequency?
Then I think that should have been your answer initially, that you don't have a hands-on of all the failure and failure rates that takes place at the site.
It is very important to me to make sure that I provide you with accurate and correct information. I do not want to give you any inaccuracy that can mislead you to think something else.
And just,
I appreciate that.
just to step back, just a reminder also, as Mr. McDonough had pointed out, for this line of questioning on both ends, we just need to remind ourselves that we are here because of flaring events that had to do with disruption of power, and that's what this order is meant to address. And so, just in Mr. Sneer's defense, he is here to provide relevant information, and I assume he doesn't have all of the information at his fingertips as to all of the operations of the facility, but it's not relevant. But just with that background,
Madam Chair,
Senator, yeah.
it's very possible the flare could have been related to this project. We don't know. I mean, how do you know, how can you differentiate as to where how the flares were caused by this project or some other site on that property?
Are you asking what's the
The
effect?
flare, when you see the flare, you see the flare. How can you tell what caused it?
But this project and all the improvement we have made so far, both by us and SCE, have been all to address the power issue that we had. We have a history of power disruption, and we're addressing it. As far as all other elements, that's not the purpose of this project.
But can you explain maybe what Senator's question is? Can you explain how you know that flaring events are or are not the result of a power failure?
When there's a power failure, certain equipment immediately shuts down, such as pumps, and so it is evident immediately in the plant that we had a power disruption. Then we're getting confirmation from SCE to the magnitude of the power and the duration. So they are directly related.
Just to refresh my memory, how was the interest generated as relates to this problem from the very beginning? What happened that caused the system to fail?
The power disruption, we have demonstrated that we can survive anywhere from 6 to 8 cycles. There are 60 cycles per second, so this is just over 1/10 of a second. Anything over that, the equipment basically trip off. Pumps, compressor, all other equipment. At that point, you have to find a way to depressure the system, and it goes to the flare. The flare is basically a safety device. I hope I answered the question.
But with this new system. You're creating a whole new operation at that site in terms of the voltage, et cetera. Is that not correct?
What we're doing with this project is avoiding the root cause, which is the power disruption. We're getting a lot more reliable power to the plant, so what we don't end up with pumps and other equipment shutting down.
What caused the initial power disruption, to your knowledge?
The thing that causes is mylar balloons, birds, fog, shorts in people's houses, all sort of things.
That caused the power disruption?
Yes.
At this site?
At any site, including ours.
I'm talking about your site now.
Maybe the senator could be more specific about which power interruption we're talking about. There were multiple interruptions in 2016 and
Well,
2017.
let's move on. My question is, you talked about there's power disruption for a short period of time. And can you estimate the duration of time that you had the power interruption for 2016, 2017?
2016, the longest one was 26 minutes. This is the longest this plant ever experienced. Most of the disruptions are within that 8 or maybe 10 or 12 cycles. So it'll be just over a tenth of a second.
Sure. All right, thank you. Well, one other question. When these flares or failure occur, are they reported to the district? You maintain a record, right? Of the failure. You maintain a record.
We maintain a record.
And do you share that to the district, with the district?
But the failure is not necessarily that the equipment failed. The failure is that we lost the power to run the equipment.
And what happens when you lose the power? Any flaring takes place?
At that point, if the loss of the equipment is so substantial, then we have to shut down units and sometimes the entire plant. In the October 2016 event, when we lost power for 26 minutes, the entire plant was down. And then there's a whole process that took us about a week to restart all the equipment.
So that's the definition of substantial.
That was very substantial, yes.
Right, and is that recorded and reported to the district, yes or no?
Absolutely.
All right.
Mr. Balagopoulos, you.
Yes, Mrs. Mayor. On the burner management system, what exactly are you doing there?
So if you're talking about the detail, I'm going to have to call one of my colleagues on that. I'm not familiar with the detail, with the logic, and if that's what you want to do.
No, because sometimes, so you're not sure at this point whether it'll require permitting from the district?
At this point, I'm not aware that we will need anything, but it may, because they're not done with all the studies.
But you're in discussion with the permitting staff on that issue?
I don't know if that's started yet.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Senior? Seeing none. Thank you. Mr. McDonough, I assume you have no other witnesses?
That's it from us.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did have one other question. I just wanted to make sure, Mr. Senior, that you are, we have this proposed order. I assume you have seen it from the district, and that you are in agreement as to the one change to paragraph 8C, and also with the next return date being January 30th of 2020. And I ask about the second one because I know I believe in your declaration and in the status report that you were not proposing additional dates, but you are in agreement with that date and for the return.
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you.
And Madam Chairwoman, if I may, just a little housekeeping. You'll see that that change would have us reporting into the district 4 times a year. I know that the board may be inclined to set another date in this hearing, but I would respectfully submit that at some point that 4 times per year update of the district may be sufficient oversight here, and I would put it to the board as a decision as whether we need to continue with status reports in the matter. But we're happy to abide by whatever decision the board makes.
And I appreciate the reasons why you suggest that, and we'll have a discussion, but it's my feeling that it's such a long order that it's important that we at least have yearly updates. Ms. Manwaring, did you want to present any witnesses?
No. Next to me, I have Mr. Paul Caballero, who is the newly, not a new inspector, but has recently replaced the previous inspector, which is why we asked for the change in condition 8C. But we have no affirmative testimony to provide other than to say that this is, there's no new information here. This is what the facility's been reporting to us.
Thank you. Anyone wish to hear from a district witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. I'm going to ask at this time then if there's any member of the public who is here who wishes to be heard on this matter, and I see none. And Ms. Manwaring, I'll leave it to you if you have any closing.
Just very briefly, in February of 2017, this board issued an aggressive abatement order intended to last multiple years. It was ambitious in the sense that it requires a large refinery to work with a major utility, and we're very pleased to say the reports that we've heard and that we have independently verified with our outside consultant and our district inspectors, and particularly enlightening is the improvements in relationship between the party before us, the refinery, and the party not before us, the utility. So I'd like to thank this board for what so far has been a very successful order.
And thank you for bringing it to the board. Mr. McDonough, do you have a closing?
No, other than to thank the board for its time in listening to our testimony, and if there's any further questions, we're available.
Board members, I don't know if anyone wishes to begin, but I can, since it's been my standing order. But my feeling is, as the parties have suggested, this is very straightforward. We got through this very quickly, I'm pleased to, to say. I think everything speaks for itself. This was it has been a very long-standing order. And no one knew how it was going to work out in terms of the timing and everything. Every time the facility comes and Mr. Senior testifies, he'll tell us a date, and next time he comes, that date has been accurate. And so everything is going as it should be going, and as Ms. Manwaring pointed out, it's great to see the relationship between a utility and a facility that has really resulted in obvious benefits in terms of power outages and flaring that might result. And so with that, I think with everything we heard today and everything we received before, I don't think we need to hear from the parties for another year. I do think, though, that's my feeling, I don't know about other board members, but it's still very unclear how long this order will take, and so I think we do need to at least hear once a year so that we can be updated in this way. And so the proposed order, the two changes, I would support. And if anyone else has any thoughts, Senator?
I think a year is too long. They testified that it would take 2 years to complete the project, approximately. We'd like to know sooner than that they're on schedule. Now, they can still report to the board, and it can be a stipulated agreement that the report will be made to us and stipulated that those occurrences or improvement are taking place. I'd like to get a report quarterly, and then, of course, we don't have to have a full hearing, but we have a report before us.
So you would like to see perhaps paragraph 8C, which has the report that is provided to the district on a quarterly basis. You'd like to see it also provided to the board?
On a quarterly basis, as we are doing.
And would that be agreeable to the parties, Mr. McDonough?
Well, I think that quarterly for this board is probably overkill. We are in a stipulated order setting. This is not a contested order, so really our primary contacts are with the district to ensure that they're happy with the carrying out of the order. So respectfully, if the district believes we need to be at the hearing board more often, then of course that, we would take precedence on that, but I think it's overkill.
Well, I don't believe we have to be before the board more than by next year. I believe there's nothing that's going to happen between now and by a year from now, we won't have that last upgrade finished through a turnaround, and nothing else will be changed. However, if you're going to generate the report and there's a board member who wishes to have it, is there,
Yeah, I guess if we're generating the board report and giving it to Ms. Manwaring in the district, you may want to ask them if they have any objection to sharing that with the board. If they want to share it, I have no objection.
Normally, the district will not allow itself to be subject to an order
no,
under an abatement
and
order.
we would not frame it that
But
way.
the district would never withhold a report or information from this board if it's so requested.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll leave it as is, and with a request from the board, should we want to have the quarterly reports shared with us. Does that make sense?
It makes it a lot. Information is always good. To know you're on target, you're accomplishing what you say you're going to accomplish, and there's transparency. For whatever reason that you think this might be too frequent, I don't understand it at all. Please.
Personally, well, since we're in deliberation, I believe that the facility has been very on target. And I don't need to see it, but we've already had agreement from the district that if we request it, we can have a copy of it. Does anyone else wish to, Mr. Balagopalan?
Yes. As regards the stipulated order, I'm glad to see that the refinery is making good progress in complying with the order. So happy with that progress, and hopefully it'll get into compliance with the order. My only concern, and I know it's a stipulated order, but I have mentioned the third quarter of 2018 had substantial emissions, and I know it's not related to the power issue. So hopefully the district is looking into that, and maybe we will hear from the district sometime regarding that. Thank you.
Good point. And Ms. Byrd?
I just wanted to say that it is good to see progress. This is a long order, probably the longest that I've seen since I've been here. But this is also a complex operation. It's a refinery, and it's a large utility. And to know that those two are working together and progress is being made is something to be considered as I won't say success, but at least we know that it's possible. We know also, based on what the testimony was, that the project can't be completed before the turnaround, and the turnaround won't be for another 18 to 24 months. So while I understand getting as much information as possible, I don't necessarily have to have a quarterly report, but since it is available at the district, we can access it that way. So I'm good with that. Thank you.
Senator, you had more to add?
I'd like to know what problems caused those other flares to take place at the site. May not be directly related to this project, but it's still within the district area, and it can become a real nuisance. You are the engineer in the project. When the flare takes place, I'd like to know about it. Period. To say I don't know and it's not available to me, the question was asked, I think it's a legitimate question, in my view.
It's a legitimate thing to want to know. It is not related to this order, but as Mr. Balagopalan pointed out, it is available to the public, so you can always get that information online. That's where he got it from in the first place. And I hesitate to bring more evidence into that is unrelated and that is not coming in through the parties. So.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the governing board required all operators of flare subject to Rule 1118 to report quarterly emissions 30 days after the quarter is over to the district, and the district posts those emission data on its website. So the emission data is posted on AQMD's website for the public to see what the refineries have emitted.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion in the matter of South Coast Air Quality Management District versus Torrance Refining Company, LLC, case number 6060-5. I move that we amend the stipulated order with the changes that are found in Exhibit D, the proposed order that was submitted by the district. And that will include the change to paragraph 8C, which is currently on page 14 of the order, with those changes that are there, including the person to whom quarterly reports are made, and an addition of the updates of progress and timeline for completion as is stated in the proposed order on Exhibit D, and also that the next status hearing and modification will be on January 30th, 2020, with the status report due 10 days at least prior to that hearing date, as is also set forth in Exhibit D. And we will make no other changes to the order, and that completes my motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
I'll second.
Mr. Balagopalan seconds. Is there any discussion on that, Senator?
I raised the question about if they report in quarterly to the district, I'd like to see a copy of those reports.
Yes, and Ms. Manwaring stated that she will make it available. But as the district, we cannot put them under requirement by the order. However, Ms. Manwaring has represented that she will happily share it with members of the board should we request it. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Okay. Senator, how do you vote? He votes aye. Dr. Lerner, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Byrd, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Balagopalan?
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have one other item for today, and that is our hearing board general meeting. But before we do that, let's take a little break. Let's go off the record and come back at 10 after 10. We are off the record.